Dan, how did the Snowbirds evolve?
Well, I think if you talk about in terms of choreography of the Snowbird show, it really has been very much an evolutionary thing. If you consider back in 1971 when the team had its first season, first of all, it of course only had 7 aircraft. It was not an aerobatic team per se. It was designed as a formation demonstration team, certainly planted the seed. But we've come a long, long way since then. The first major step, of course, was in 1972 when they added the 2 solo aircraft. But even then, the formation was still restricted to what it could do. It wasn't until 1973 when the team could do formation aerobatics per se, and even until 1974 when they could do formation changes during an aerobatic maneuver. Since that time, it's been very much a learning process, I think. It's been a matter of learning more about the Tudor aircraft. Even though we've been flying it for 20 years, we still continue to learn things about the airplane, things we can and cannot do. Of course, our show has always been designed for the spectator, and of course, that's what you're trying to achieve. Anytime you make a change to the choreography of the show, it's to try and improve the visual impact with the spectator. One of the great things about the Snowbirds is the fact that we have always had virtually total flexibility in designing our own shows, and it's awfully nice for a team leader to be given that kind of confidence from the powers to be, the commander of the Air Force, that sort of thing, to allow you and your team members, because it's very much a team thing, to go out, look at the show that's been done in previous years, and say, okay, where can we change the show for the sake of improvement? Not necessarily the change for the sake of change, but how do we improve that visual impact that we're trying to give the spectators who are watching the show? And that can be done in a lot of different ways. It can be done by changing a maneuver, modifying a maneuver that already exists in the show. It can be done by introducing a brand new maneuver. And over the years, the team has demonstrated that the pilots on the team have tremendous imagination when it comes to designing new maneuvers. It can also be changed with how you put your smoke on, where you put your smoke on during the show. It could be changed with colored smoke, for example. It can also be changed in terms of music. And the music in our show, I think we probably use more music in our show than any other team in the world. And I think we use it to very good advantage. We've had tremendous success in using both David Foster's music, who's a very good friend of ours, and also Stephen Batali, an upcoming young producer from Toronto. Both, of course, are Canadian, and that adds to the overall Canadian content of the show. So those are some of the ways that we've been able to make positive changes to the show. In terms of building the actual choreography, as I said before, it's up to the team members on that particular team. And a couple of factors involved there. First of all, of course, is the personalities involved. Everybody on this team is an excellent pilot. There's no question about that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. But from time to time, you'll find that because of different personalities, there are some things that perhaps you'd like to try and do that you can't necessarily do, or that are just not working out. When we're building a show, we use very much a building block process. You take a maneuver that perhaps has been done for many years, whether it be a simple loop, a formation, a 9-plane formation roll, for example, and you don't start off with 9 aircraft, and you certainly don't start off at 4 feet overlap on the wingtips, which is our eventual show formation. But you start off with perhaps 4 aircraft, with the second-year pilots, flying with the first-year pilots, teaching them how to do the basic formation maneuvers and formation aerobatics. Start off with a simple loop and a roll. From there, as each pilot becomes more comfortable with his new position, the first-year pilots, then you start to let them go solo for certain maneuvers. And it's obviously the big goal that the team always has is to get all 9 guys solo. I mean, that's your first real indication that you're going in the right direction. When you get all 9 pilots solo for the first time, and you go out there and you do a 9-plane loop. That is really an exciting development in your show. We always try and get that done before Christmas if we can, weather permitting. Then, of course, you progress to the next most difficult maneuver, which is a 9-plane roll. Quite a bit more difficult than doing a straight loop. So once you've achieved that sort of thing, then you gradually, and very gradually, over about a 5.5-month period, start to build the different maneuvers into the show. Now, while the formation players are doing their part, working on their maneuvers one by one, of course, the solos have got a totally different type of challenge out there. They certainly have to be involved with the formation because they're going to be an integral part of that 9-plane formation, but they have to go out there and do their specialized work. And of course, they'll start off relatively high above the ground, flying together in one aircraft because the new opposing solo must learn to mirror the performance of the lead solo in the opposite aircraft. And that's the only way that you can end up with a truly synchronized co-solo show, is if they're both flying their aircraft as closely as possible to each other. And that takes a long time. Of course, the other thing they have to contend with is the fact that they're starting off at high altitude and slowly working down to the point where working down at show altitude, relatively low to the ground at relatively high speed, and that's just working by yourself, one aircraft. Once they're comfortable doing that, then again, they'll use the same building block process. They'll go out and they'll start doing their head-on crosses to each other, initially very wide apart, relatively high above the ground, until that comfort level builds up for the new solo, whereby they can allow themselves to get a little bit closer, slowly move down in altitude, and then again, that magic day when they first come together and do a level roll against each other for the very first time. And so again, it's a confidence building process for both the opposing solo and the lead solo, because he's depending on that opposing solo to miss him every time. And what you eventually try and do then is you get the formation working at a certain pace, you get the solos working at their own pace, and gradually you're going to bring those two together, both in terms of incorporating the solos into the 9-plane formation aerobatic maneuvers, and equally important, as the formation works up a maneuver, then you can start to integrate the solo maneuver that's going to come either before or after that formation maneuver. And usually by about February time frame, we'd like to have the whole show fully integrated together, about the middle of February. What that then allows you to do is you're still flying relatively wide apart at what we call a wingtip formation. Then you're probably flying the show at 500 feet above ground. You're going to move it down to 300 feet. And now it's time to get into your show formation, get into the 4 feet of overlap, and start, and with the solos doing the head-on maneuvers, and then start to work on the polish of the show. And of course, the timing of the show is very, very critical, because a lot of times when the formation is out doing a split, for example, the show is designed such that there's always something taking place in front of the crowd. So the formation comes in, does a split. Now when those 7 aircraft are rejoining for the next maneuver, the 2 solos are on stage and doing their maneuver. By the time those solos are finished, hopefully you've got 7 aircraft together coming in from perhaps a different direction, smoking on. And what we're trying to achieve is smoke on with no more of a gap than about 8 to 10 seconds between maneuvers. And that's one of the things that's made our show so popular, I think, is because we can keep that show fairly tight, keep it very active all the time, coming from different directions. And that's the beauty of having 9 aircraft to choreograph with. It makes it relatively easy.
Yeah, so this is basically all working to a blueprint, and this blueprint has taken 20 years to develop.
Well, I think that if you talk in terms of the overall show and describe it as a blueprint, as I said, there are certain maneuvers that we started off with back in the early 70s that are very popular maneuvers. A basic 9-plane loop, the big 9 roll, for example, are very, very popular maneuvers. You would never change those basic maneuvers. What we've learned over the years is, as we became more comfortable with using the tutor for the aerobatic routine, and we got some people in with imagination, I think we were influenced certainly by watching some of the European teams as well. They do some very exciting things, and so I think that back in about 1987, when we started doing some inverted formation flying, we introduced a maneuver called the double take, where we had the 2 inside wingmen, 4-plane maneuver, 2 inside wingmen actually flying formation upside down, and then doing a half roll. That was really a revolutionary step. I think we've taken it one step further now in 1990, when we've taken, again, the formation, a 7-plane formation, and we've rolled 4 aircraft in very close proximity to the 3 other aircraft that form the stem, something we call the Fillion roll. So it's been a matter of confidence building, getting used to that aircraft, realizing what both the aircraft limitations are and your own personal limitations, and of course that's extremely important. But over that time frame, it's just gradually got better and better and better. And same thing for the solos. I mean, years ago, we probably didn't think a lot about how attractive a 2-plane formation coming across inverted would be. The double inverted pass that the solos do now is very, very popular, and they fly it very well. And years ago, it wasn't done. So their show has really evolved over the years every bit as much as the formation has.
You often hear the performance of the show referred to as a ballet. What are the elements that cause people to think of it that way?
I think one of the things about our show in terms of being described as a ballet is simply the fact that you've got 9 aircraft. It is a large formation. The wingspan, for example, when we're flying the Concorde, is about somewhere in the neighborhood of 180, 185 feet. Well, that's less than the wingspan of a 747, but when you've got that many aircraft and they're all smoking and at relatively slow speeds, as you're doing these looping maneuvers, they're leaving a tremendous smoke trail in the sky. And I think another reason that we get the sort of response that we do is, as I mentioned before, the music. The music is really important. The music sets the tone for the whole show. It can be used to build excitement during the show on some of the more dynamic maneuvers, and it can be used to slow down the process and just sit back and watch the beauty of 9 airplanes doing loops and rolls. More of a balletic type situation. So that's been important.
So when you came on as leader in 1989 and approached the job for the first time, you had certain ideas that you felt that team could do. What did you do to make the 1990 show?
Okay, in terms of preparing for 1990, from my own perspective, I think probably my biggest goal has certainly been the introduction of the colored smoke. Having served in Europe, having watched the European teams for several years use colored smoke to great advantage, I felt that because we were still flying the same aircraft over this 20-year period, that one way of really significantly enhancing our show would be the introduction of colored smoke. Obviously, the 20th anniversary was an ideal time to do that. It was just one other area that we could celebrate that special 20 years. And it was also nice because we were able to tie in a new maneuver with red and white smoke called the Maple Leaf Split. Now, with 1990 being the 25th anniversary of the Canadian flag, that just fit in very naturally. We were looking for a new maneuver. I came up with the idea of doing a split head onto the crowd. And just to give you an example of one of the things, how we changed this from the year before, one of the things I didn't like about last year was the fact that we had a double looping maneuver. In other words, a maneuver that we came towards the crowd from stage left, and we looped it twice coming towards the crowd. Well, that first loop was so far away that I didn't think it was as effective as it could be. So we changed the choreography such that we did a single loop and then did a silhouette and one maneuver, and then took that other loop that we'd done, brought it head on towards the crowd in a very large formation, in the 7-plane Vic formation, changed formation during the loop, came down the backside, and now pulled it up and split it in a very dramatic way, head on towards the crowd. That was the initial portion of that maneuver. It was only after I realized that it was the 25th anniversary of the Canadian flag that we thought, well, how about if we try smoking off at different times to see if we can outline a maple leaf in the sky. And I think when people see the maneuver this year in 1990, with a little bit of imagination, they're going to see what we were trying to achieve, and it's going to be very popular, particularly since we start off that initial loop with red and white smoke, and then as we hit the bottom, just as I call the split, the burst, we all switch to red. So you end up with a red maple leaf in the sky. So I think it's going to be very positive. Okay, so where would you like to start with that then?
Just ask you about colored smoke.
Okay.
So, was colored smoke a complicated thing to do?
Colored smoke for us is going to be a real adventure, and the biggest problem with using colored smoke for the Snowbirds is the simple fact that we are the only team in the world that does not have a support aircraft. When we go on the road, we have 11 airplanes, we only have 10 technicians, and that's all you get. So first of all, to get the diesel dye mixture, which is what we use for the colored smoke, we can't take it with us. It's just got to be pre-shipped. That's done easily enough. I think the big thing that concerns me, and I know concerns some other people, is the workload that it's going to involve with our ground crew. So we've gone out to the other Canadian Forces bases across the country. We've asked for some additional support when we are in situ, and of course we're only using colored smoke at the major shows this year. And I hope that'll work out, because there's going to be a lot of additional workload in terms of hand pumping the dye into the aircraft, and then possibly a little bit of cleaning of the aircraft afterwards, because it is a dye mixture. So if you have a little bit of spillage, you're going to get some dye on other parts of the aircraft and that sort of thing. So that's really been the big thing. But I think that in the final analysis, what I'm hoping is that when people see the effect of the colored smoke, they'll realize that all the work that it's going to take to make it happen will be well worth it. Certainly that's been the case with the European teams. Colored smoke has been a tremendous advantage to them in helping exercise their mandate of public relations to the general public.
What else did you add to the 1990 show?
For 1990, there were basically three things that we accomplished. I've talked about the colored smoke. The other thing that we did, in addition to the brand new maneuver, the Maple Leaf Split, was we took an existing maneuver and I think we made it into a much better maneuver. I had alluded before back to 1987 when it was really a revolutionary year because the formation pilots started to do more aerobatic maneuvers within the concept of the formation itself. And they had something called the rollback, and we did that last year in 1989. What we're doing this year is we're adjusting that rollback a little bit to pull up the aircraft individually. So you have 4 aircraft pulling up, doing individual barrel rolls around each other, and I can show that to you here in a minute. But basically, what they do is they do that, and then as they come across stage center, a brand new maneuver, something we call the fill and roll, involves those same 4 aircraft now rolling in formation against a 3-stem aircraft. And with colored smoke, we've done it in practice. We've seen what it looks like. It's going to be very dynamic, and I think will be a brand new dimension and a brand new maneuver that's probably going to stick with the team for many years to come now.
So once you've designed this and have all of this evolution of roles and things that you know that you can do, in the final analysis, it's timing. Practice, and timing. It's a tremendous amount of practice. You know, once we have the show together, we feel that we need to do a minimum of 12 practices a week. And if we lose one of those practices because of weather, then that means you're going to fly in a weekend. And that's just what we feel that we need to do. As everybody gets more confident in the show, and the show gradually tightens up itself, then the show becomes that much more dynamic. And of course, then you have the music. And the other important part of the show, which really can make a big difference, is your commentary. How your narrator, which is one of our coordinators, is actually how his delivery is to the audience. You know, is he giving a presentation that's dynamic in itself? And if it is, it's a wonderful thing to hear. You know, so you have 3 aspects coming together: the show itself, the music, and the commentary, and they are all an integral part of the show. Each is equally important to make the show a big success. So you guys are focused entirely on your audience.
We have always, I think one of the things that's made the team so popular over this past 20 years is the fact that we have always designed our show for the people watching the show. Not necessarily for pilots in the show, because a lot of times some of your simplest maneuvers are your most effective. But we've tried to incorporate the best of both worlds. We're making it for the general public. There are always 1 or 2 maneuvers in there, like the line abreast roll, for example. It's an extremely difficult maneuver that the pilots can look up and say, now that is tough. And so we get hopefully a little appreciation from them as well.
And most of what the pilots are called on to do, other than being extremely extended in terms of the demands on them in close proximity and timing and so on, is most of what they're called on to do in this design what a pilot is accustomed to doing anyway?
Well, I think that anytime you're talking about military aviation, military pilots, there are obviously a number of different fields. Every one of those fields has its own unique challenges. Certainly, if you're flying an F-18 in a combat role or in preparation for a combat role, that in itself is a very demanding environment. A search and rescue in a Sea King helicopter over a crippled ship in the middle of the North Atlantic at night in a storm is an extremely demanding environment. So I think that when people come onto the Snowbirds, irrespective of where they come from, they will already be used to the challenges of military aviation in some other sector. And now it's a matter of taking their overall experience and their overall airmanship and focusing it into something that's very, very specialized. Probably in some respects no more specialized than what they've been doing in their other fields, but nonetheless very, very focused to something that's very unique and that very, very few pilots have the opportunity to do.
There's a tremendous demand on the